Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the chairman for putting this hearing together today on this important subject. And I was just thinking about, in a kind of a broad sense, how serious this situation is. Americans have a Fourth Amendment expectation of privacy regarding all their information, including, as we've talked about, information stored in the cloud. Yet government can come to a third party, like Mr. Burt's company, and with something less than a warrant, get that information. And when government does that, they tell Mr. Burt that he can't tell his customer what's going on. He can't tell his customer that, hey, your Fourth Amendment liberties have just been violated. And when government initiates it all, the Attorney General doesn't even sign off on it. Now, if that's not serious, I mean, the current situation that brought us here is the situation that's been in the press. And we've had Mr. Barr, as I think it's in Mr. Turley's testimony, he says, very first point, the authorization, it's notable. I'd say it's more notable. I said it's shocking, it's alarming that Jeff Sessions, Bill Barr, and Merrick Garland all deny any knowledge of what took place. Somebody had to sign off on it. So you got the fundamental issue at stake here, and you got no one who's been Senate confirmed, which is part of our checks and balances on protecting our liberties, who's even signed off on this. So I find this, as Mr. Gates, I think, led off on our side, the idea that we can work together on this, Mr. Chairman, and do something, whether it's the SHIELD law that I've co-sponsored in the past with Mr. Raskin or what have you, but that is the situation. And I'm just curious, Mr. Burt, has it happened to the same customer several times?
I'm sure it has happened to the same customer several times, although I can't say that with any specificity, but I'm sure it has happened.
So it could be even worse than I just described.
It could be. I would just, one thing of Congressman is that one of the things we always do when we get these processes, we look to make sure that it's adequate. We will not produce our customers' content, our email or other content data without a warrant. We require a warrant, but we still get subject to the secrecy order, so we can't tell the customer that their data has been taken, and only the customer can actually exercise their Fourth Amendment right. But you can't exercise your right if you don't know it's been violated.
And even when you suspect it might be, and they tell you, as in the Gonzalez case, which Mr. Turley has cited, they can specifically tell you, no, you can't even, they can't do it. There's no way to go make your case and be an advocate and do what you need to do in a court.
That's right. The court would say we don't have standing on the Fourth Amendment issue, and we would be told we don't have the right to tell our customer that they should go look to see if their Fourth Amendment rights have been violated.
Okay, so Mr. Turley, what should we do? This may be the first time this committee, this Congress, has actually kind of had some kind of agreement on maybe we can work together on something. So tell us steps 1, 2, and 3, what you think we should do, because I do think, I mean, the idea that Mr. Raskin and I, who don't agree on a whole lot, agree, and we've co-sponsored this legislation, I think is telling. And you've heard the comments from both sides. So give us the 1, 2, 3 that the Congress of the United States should pass.
Well, putting aside the SHIELD law, which we discussed, I note there are 6 areas I think you should look at, but I think that you need to strengthen these standards. You need to give courts more concrete standards, give standing to companies like Microsoft, like New York Times, to be able to contest these issues, to limit these types of agreements. You got to stop relying on the goodwill of the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice says that these types of orders have to be, quote, extraordinary measures, not standard investigatory practices. But if the reports are true, as what we've been reading about, then that and a buck will buy you a cup of coffee. It was not worth you know, the paper they wrote it on. You need to establish concrete standards that can be appealed, and that the critical parties of interest can be in that room. And then we also need greater transparency on how many of these things are being issued and their conditions. You have a number of courts that have complained in writing that they're getting nothing but boilerplate language from the Justice Department and little ability of the court to say no.
Great. Thank you all. Mr. Burt, do you want to?
Yeah, we detail in my written testimony the steps we think the committee should consider, but I could just emphasize a couple of them as really critical. First, the restriction on us telling our customer is a restriction on our First Amendment right, and a number of courts have recognized that, which means that the standard of a secrecy order should be a strict scrutiny standard, but that's not being applied. So the corrective legislation would be clear that strict scrutiny should be applied and that there must be findings by the court based on compelling evidence submitted to the court showing that that standard has been met. And even then, these privacy orders should never be longer than we propose 90 days without clear evidence being shown later on as to why they should be extended. We think just those steps would significantly reduce the number of these privacy orders that are even sought, and would certainly reduce the number that are being granted and confine them to those cases where they are truly necessary in the national interest, because they would have to show to get that privacy order that they can meet one of those 5 statutory bases for getting a privacy order, which are reasonable reasons to proceed in a short-term private secret way.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Jeffries?
Thank the distinguished chair for holding this hearing.